And we are live here in the Storycraft Cafe. I am your host, Hank Garner, as always. Today, I am super excited to have joining us here in the cafe A.N. Sage or Anessa. Um, Super happy to have you on the show, Anessa. She has a brand new book, Killing Grinds. It's the third book in the Orchard Hollow book series coming out in just under a month, but it's available for pre-order now. You can go grab that one, and when it's released, it can be delivered directly to your Kindle or the paperback shipped to your house. All of that, but there's plenty in her back catalog for you to work on while you're waiting for this new book to release. Anessa, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, hi. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited. I just
I'm
noticed
ex-
the writing a cozy mystery on your shelf there. I have
yes.
that too.
Oh, do you? Yeah,
Yeah, it's a
it's
great
I
book.
I just I just got it in the mail the other day, and I'm working on a series of videos about different plot or plotting styles or different tools to use for plotters and things like that, and I've just been collecting books on different um I'm grasping for words today.
Structures
Different
and
approaches to
yes, yes.
approaches. I don't know why I couldn't grab that word. Different approaches to plotting and laying out certain types of books. So that's what I'm currently working
Yeah,
through right
no,
now.
that's a good one. Yeah. I'm also a huge plotter, so I feel that.
Nice. So to get started, I discovered you because I was Googling or searching on YouTube something about cozy mysteries. I guess it was. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but you offered something, some sort of tool. I'm trying to remember what it was now, but I signed up on your website and I
Yeah.
signed up for your newsletter. And then a couple of weeks ago, you sent out a newsletter saying that you had just tried Dabble,
Yes.
and I work for Dabble.
Yeah.
I work
It
in the
was
marketing, and I was like,
serendipitous.
well, how cool is that? Let me reach
Yeah.
out to her and let's bring her on the podcast and have a conversation. So anyway, that's how we got to where
That
we
small
are.
world, I know. You probably
Yeah.
got the plotting a cozy mystery that I was
Yes.
little template that I did. Yes, because it,
Yes.
it is a little bit different from all my other plotting resources that I offer on the YouTube channel. So
Yeah. That's exactly what it was. But anyway, I'm super happy that we connected, and that we have common ground that we were able to connect on.
yes.
Um, Before we get into all the great stuff we're going to talk about, I love to start the conversation with a fun question. And one
So,
question I love to ask people is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
oh my gosh. Okay, so I have my first memory, but then I also have kind of like a family little tidbit that apparently when
I
I was
love it.
2, I wrote my first
That's a
rhyming
bonus.
poem. It's about a cow, and I guess that started it all. But my own personal one was, I guess it was grade 8, and I was really big in the goosebumps and all of the ghostly kind of stories. And I wrote my first ghost book. It was awful. It'll never see the light of day. It was terribly plotted, but but it's all handwritten, and I wrote the entire book. I think it was almost 200 pages, just my
Oh,
little
wow.
chicken scratches about a girl who moves into a haunted mansion, and very Casper retelling probably at the time.
Love it.
But
Love it.
I was hooked after that on telling stories.
Everyone has to have that trunk novel experience. You
Oh,
write
for
that
sure,
thing,
yeah.
and
That like
yeah,
it's embarrassing. I've never. I'm trying to find it every time I go through stuff. I try to find it, but that probably my subconscious is telling me not to. So
that's so funny.
but yeah, I was
Um,
always big on stories. Like as a kid, I remember everybody else would play outside, and I would just kind of try to get all the neighborhood kids together, and we'd go werewolf hunting. And I made everybody carry notebooks, and every time you saw like a scratch on the car, that was the werewolf. And now I think about it, I'm like, oh my god, what a cultish experience I was giving these children.
love it. That is so funny. Do you now Killing Grinds we mentioned earlier is the newest book in the Orchard Hollow series, and this is a um a mystery. It
Yeah.
is. Would you call yourself a mystery author? I know you also dabble in some urban fantasy and things like
Yes.
that.
Yeah. I
Where
think
would you say that you reside primarily?
Yeah, I would say every single one of my stories has mystery in it. My author tagline is mayhem, mystery, magic. So there's always some kind of mystery. There's even all my urban fantasy and all of the YA stuff, there's usually some kind of murder to solve. But the Orchard Hollow series is a paranormal cozy mystery. And it's my first one for adults. So that's something.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Have you always been a fan of mysteries?
Yes, yeah. Oh, like murder mysteries. Agatha Christie was like my first love. Anytime there's some kind of murder mystery on TV show, movie, doesn't matter what it is, I have to watch it right away. And of course, the paranormal.
Love it. I love it. Why do you think? And this is not something I intended to talk about, but why do you think cozy mysteries and paranormal are such a frequent pairing, and why do those two genres seem to work so well together?
So I think in general, whenever you have any kind of the mystery element and the paranormal is mysterious in itself. So I think the pairing of the
Yeah.
two, these are two things you don't know much about. And while one can be solved, the other one always remains almost this constant, like foreboding mystery in the background. So I think
Yeah.
once you mix magic or witches or whatever it is that you're writing, ghosts, especially ghosts and mystery, if you're solving a murder and there's a ghost involved, I mean, they go hand in hand.
You're right.
So I think there's like it's an added level of mystery to your mystery and that I think you can play with, especially as an author. It gives you a lot to work with.
Right. Right. So from this young teenager who began writing books, how did that transfer to actually writing your first novel that was published? One
Yep.
thing that I love is I've done over 1,500 author interviews, and I could count the people on two hands that writing has been their singular focus, that all
Right.
they ever did was write and publish books. Most people have sort of a circuitous route,
Mhm.
that winds them
Yes.
up at writing. What
Yep.
was your experience?
It was definitely the second. I did not, as I'm sure you could tell from my description of that first novel, I did not necessarily publish that. But it took me a while to get there. I've always been a creative, so I did start more in visual. So I do illustrate still, but I started in photography and then I became a
Okay.
creative director. So there's some kind of creative element always in my life. And when I was a creative director for a very large company, and I had a lot of these kids that worked basically under me and reported to me, and they were doing all these fun and exciting things, and I was just thinking, I'm just over here drowning in paperwork. Like, what happened to that person who told stories not just by writing but even visually? And I wanted to get some of that back, and I started reading a lot of young adult at the time, and I just remember feeling so excited, like I was back to my old self, that werewolf hunter on the street was back again. It was just very exciting to read these stories. And I started remembering how much I love to write. And I thought, you know what? Maybe I can do this. Let me try it out. Worst case scenario, it becomes another haunted mansion. If you can hear that outside, I'm so sorry.
No, no, it's
Somebody's
fine. It's
doing
fine.
constructions right outside. Wonderful timing for Halloween. But I was thinking that, hey, you know what? Doesn't see the light of day again, that's fine. At least I would have tried it. And it gave me something to do outside of that 9 to 5 office work, which when you're a
Yeah.
creative, that's hard to kind of to do every single day. So I would
Yeah.
come home and I would just type away and write. And I started writing this book and it became the first book of my first series ever published,
Oh,
Etherborn.
wow. And how long ago was this?
Oh, geez. This was probably 6, 7 years ago, I want to say.
Okay.
So that was
Okay.
the first one published. I did have a nonfiction published before that when I was blogging and doing all of that stuff. But as far as like fiction work, that was about 7 years ago that Etherborn came
Gotcha.
out. And it's been a
Gotcha.
whirlwind since. I was indie published originally. I'm a hybrid author now, so a lot has changed.
Wow. I've noticed something that seems to happen in a lot of writers' lives. They usually are creative in more than one
Yes.
form.
Yes.
I've met so many actors, or people that were frustrated actors, or screenwriters or directors that then turned to novel writing, and
Yes.
for a number of reasons. But there does seem to be some overlap. Lots of actors and people in the visual arts that way. And then I've known several visual artists, like yourself, that does cover design, layout,
Mhm.
and that sort of thing. And there's an overlap with writing fiction. And musicians, oh my goodness, there's so
Yeah.
many people that are musically gifted and creative. What do you think it is about one form of expression that tends to feed another form, but maybe not in ways that are evident? Like I use I'm fairly musically adept.
I can see the mic and that.
Yeah, I can play a little bit of several different instruments, but there sometimes when I'm creatively blocked, or I'm writing something and it's just not working the way I want, I'll pick up my guitar and just start playing around, and invariably the tangles will untangle
Yep.
themselves.
Mhm.
Do you notice a similar thing like that? Can you stop working on a story and start doing a cover design or something? And
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I find if you're, as much as I'd love to just sit there and write 8 hours a day,
yeah,
I it would be gibberish. I don't think it can really go for a very long time. I know a lot of people who work in like 15, 30 minute, and then they take breaks, like the
yeah,
Pomodoro method. I think I can write maybe an hour and a half at a time, and then afterwards my brain is mush. I have to take a break,
yeah.
and work on something completely different. And then when I start writing again, it has to be a different project. So I don't even think I'm usually working on two things at a time. So I don't,
Understood.
as far as writing goes. But in between, yeah, it's why I started illustrating too, and I started the Etsy shop for my illustrations, because even between cover design and writing, I needed something else. I do book coaching as well, so there's a lot of diversity in what I do, and there's always a different attention, because in the end of the day, it's still a job, and just like with any other job, you do get complacent. Um,
Yeah,
and I find the last thing you want in your story is complacency, because then it just
right.
becomes empty words, right? So
Yeah,
if you can walk away, do something else that's exciting you, and then you get bored of that, and right away the writing becomes exciting again. And so it's a
th-
constant energy upper.
sure, sure. You worked as a creative director at an
Mhm.
agency. Did you start doing book illustration and layout and that sort of thing before you started writing, or were you writing and then decided,
It
oh,
was
I can also work in this
It was
area?
kind of a mix of both. So I did start
Okay.
working on cover design back when I was with the agency for some clients, but that was not anything like what I do now. There was no digital painting or anything like that. It was strictly very much graphic design. And then when I started writing my own books, the inspiration came from seeing all these beautiful covers out there, and I wanted to replicate it. And I taught myself cover design and how to digitally illustrate, which was not something I did before, because I mean, I did photography and painting. I have two
Right.
very different things.
Two very different things.
Very
Yeah.
different things. And so I had to teach myself how to do a lot of composite and a lot of digital painting work. And then from there, I realized how much I like cutesy things and kawaii. So I started to illustrate. And
Do,
now it's all, there's so many different, like if you look back here, it looks all very boring, but like the space in front of me is pink and purple. And it's
Oh,
got
you
like
you
all,
did a video recently on your YouTube channel where you went over. I think you released it yesterday, as a matter of
yes,
fact, and
it just came.
where you went over your writing space, and it's
It's
so
wild.
cool. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
your keyboard, by the way. That's
Oh my God, that keyboard is life for me. There's
yeah,
so many
right.
lights. Like when the whole thing is lit up, I sometimes work at night. I try not to, but when I do, I feel like I'm like a gamer that's streaming in a movie.
I have I have a
Nice.
yeah, it's a mechanical keyboard with
Those
and
are the
all the
best.
keys have different colored LEDs, and you can change the LED pattern. And a lot of times when I'm not doing a show, I'll cut this main light off, and it'll be dark in here, and my
Yeah.
keyboards,
Oh my
and
God. Yeah. You need to have that clickety clack if you're,
yeah, you really do, and
especially if you're a
it's
writer.
yeah, and it's unnecessary. Like you can write without that
Oh my
stuff,
God.
but
Yeah.
why
What do you
why
want
would
to?
you want to?
Yeah,
So
exactly. I have in front of me, actually, it's funny you say that, but I have these like old
oh yeah,
Neo Smart
the
things, and
Neo
I
Smart,
keep
yeah.
thinking I want to upgrade to oh my gosh, now I can't think of the name. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and that has the e-ink screen.
Yeah, yeah, the Traveler,
The
I think it's called. Oh my,
yes,
why can't I
yeah.
think of the name? But I
I
keep
can't.
saying that to myself, but this thing works fine for now.
I had the guy that designed that and that did the
Nice.
original Kickstarter,
Oh,
and we talked all about it. And it's so
oh my
cool.
God. The free ride,
Yeah,
there we go. Oh my gosh.
yes, free write, yes.
Yeah.
Um,
Wonderful machine. It looks fantastic.
exactly, exactly. Um, so as someone who does the marketing side of writing, the
Mhm.
cover design, layout, as well as the writing of the book, do you feel like that those two things, disparate as they may seem, have sort of informed one another in your life? Do you think that being a writer helps you be a better cover designer? Do you feel like being able to encapsulate the ideas of the book on a cover
Mhm.
helps you then as a writer? Do
Yeah,
those two
no,
things?
definitely. I know exactly what you're talking about. I think it's a different storytelling version in a
Right,
way, where you're still telling a story, but you're trying to tell it visually and in the span of one page into it. But it also, I think it was helpful because now I get to also meet other authors and I get to find out about their stories, and
right,
it's helped a lot, if surprisingly, with things like writing blurbs or marketing promos, because I would get these authors in, and in order to design their cover, they basically have to summarize their book for me in two
right,
paragraphs. And to see the different ways that people summarize their own stories has really helped me figure out how to do that for my own books. And it sparks inspiration every single time, just to grow as a cover designer. In a way, I'm also growing as an artist, as an author, because you're always getting some sort of inspiration. I could be working on the cover with somebody else and come up with a completely different story idea for myself based on like an orange that I put in the cover or something.
right, right. So we're recording this on Halloween Day, meaning tomorrow is NaNoWriMo kickoff day. Are you doing Nano this year?
I am, yes, I am. So my publisher actually has a fun little thing where we all get together and we have like a group and we encourage each other. But I'm also part of a few other Nana groups, so it's a lot of pressure to to do well. People are watching.
It's
uh,
self-inflicted pressure,
it really
which
is.
is weird that we do this to
It
ourselves,
is.
but
It's and November is always a wild month. It's I've got a million birthdays, my own included, and we always go on vacation in in
yeah,
November. So I'll be writing on vacation on the beach.
my birthday is also in November. My middle daughter, her birthday was 2 days ago, but we always have a big kind of joint party kind of thing. And then Thanksgiving is this month. It's like the
Mhm.
worst month of the year,
It really is. Yeah,
but we
for
look
Nano. I
forward
don't
to
know
it
why
every
they wouldn't
year,
put Nano in like a June or something.
right? In a
Because
month that's too hot to be outside and do anything
and right
anyway.
before
So
December too, like all of that
right,
is happening.
right,
It's just, yeah. No, it's a
yeah,
lot. So we'll see how it goes. But I've
yeah.
started already kind of working, so I'm ready to hit the ground running starting tomorrow.
Nice. So you are traditionally published
Mhm.
and indie published as well
Yes.
as
Yeah.
so. Which project will you be working on? Will this be an
On
indie
the
project? Will
it's gonna be the OHB for the publisher, so it's gonna be
okay,
Orchard Hollow is, taken over by them. They acquired a lot of my backlist when I signed with
okay,
them, and so now my newest indie project is something I just started because I do wanna stay hybrid. I really like that idea,
yeah,
only just for myself because I there's a lot of pressure when you're working with the
sure,
publisher, and I think, having a different project that I don't wanna pass on or force them to take on if they don't want it. It kind of
right,
gives me that differentiation of projects that I talked about, where I can work on one during the morning and one during the afternoon, and that always keeps that excitement for me. But the
Yeah.
nano project is going to be the one for the traditionally,
All right.
which is
I'm
exciting.
glad you mentioned hybrid publishing
Mhm.
because um, in the way I see it, over the last 10, 12 years since we had the Kindle revolution and indie publishing really became a
Mhm.
thing other than just vanity publishing. That's kind of always
Yeah.
been a thing. But indie publishing, in the fact that you could produce a book, you could do, I mean, you could do your own cover design
Mhm.
and, blurb making, all that. And you could really be a one person business
Yep.
and you could legitimately publish a best selling novel
Mhm.
on your own.
And many people
Uh,
do.
and many people do. We've had many successful indie authors on the show before, and I 100% endorse back and encourage people to
Mhm.
do that. But then there's also the traditional publishing machine that's out there, and sometimes for some projects and for some authors, that is fully appropriate
Mhm.
to publish that way, and there are many benefits to that.
Yep.
And I think, in my personal opinion, is that lately, and when I say lately, I mean kind of in the grand scheme of publishing, the last 5 to 10 years, we've really seen that this is really a time where authors have choice.
Mhm.
They are empowered to choose which scenario is better for them, and maybe even on a book by book basis, and not just
Yep.
a career basis, but
Mhm.
like you're doing, that there are some things that are better for this type of publishing, some things for that,
Mhm.
and hopefully one feeds the other. And by you kind of choosing both routes,
Yep.
it kind of grows the whole. Have you noticed
Mhm.
that?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there's definitely a difference in projects. There's some projects that you might need more of a partnership with somebody. You'd need more help with, which for me, I think where the traditional publishing and working with like a different publisher actually helps out a lot, where it's not just me, because that can get very daunting. When I first started, I did everything in self-publishing, and I made a lot of mistakes. Which I share that a lot
As
on my
many of us
YouTube
did.
channel.
Yeah.
And I kind of talk about that a lot because you don't know what you're doing.
Right.
And the reach that you have when you first start out and you're indie publishing until you get to that level where the authors that you talked about who are bestsellers and until you get there, your reach is quite small. And it takes a lot of energy, both mentally and physically,
Sure.
to step over that, and that's energy you could be putting into your books. And so having both, for me, it works out because then on the one hand I can let go and just write, and then
Yeah.
still take on projects where I have all the control and I can take my time and there's no pressure, there's no deadlines. I set those myself. And I can do what I want, right? I can decide on covers, I can decide on blurbs and where I'm going to put this, how I'm going to price it, so it does make sense to have both that way.
Gotcha. How many books have you published now? I was on your
Oh, geez.
Amazon page earlier, and I lost count. I was
Oh, I
like,
know.
well,
Yeah,
yeah, a
I say
bunch.
18, and I think the
18.
19th is coming up now. But 20 if you count the indie project I've just started, because that's on pre-order as well for January.
And and 20 books in what did we say earlier? 7, 8
About
years?
7 years, yeah, 6, 7 years. Yeah.
Wow, that is an amazing
It is.
accomplishment.
I will
Um,
say that when we had the COVID, during that
yeah.
year, I basically just stayed at home, and I think I wrote 6 or 7 books in that year.
Oh wow.
Which most of Shadowhurst, my series, my young adult urban fantasy, that was mostly written
Nice.
during that time, during the 2020. So
Hey, might as well put the time to good use,
if
right?
you're just sitting at home and you can't
If you're
leave,
just sitting at home, might as well create a new world to live in.
yeah, it's surprising how writing all day doesn't seem quite as daunting then.
Right, right. We mentioned your video earlier where you talked about your Preptober, and let me see, do I still have that open? Yeah, you did a video plotting tips for NaNoWriMo, how to quickly develop a story.
Yes.
Um, and you give some great tips on there on how to, even if you're not a plotter,
Hmm.
how you can use um, some of these ideas to help you develop a roadmap so that you're not just wasting a lot of
Yes.
NaNoWriMo.
Yeah.
When
And
I first
editing after
began,
NaNoWriMo can be hellish.
Yes, yes.
It's a lot of word vomit sometimes.
Right. When I would not call myself a traditional plotter.
Mhm.
I have some friends that are diehard outliners and they go
Yes.
deep on outlines. And that just kind of scares me a little bit.
Right.
Maybe I have a hang up from high school English class or something. I don't know, but it kind of weirds me out a little bit. Um, I kind of like the creative chaos in my brain, but
Mhm.
I'll tell you what. The first time I did NaNoWriMo, which was about 10 years ago, I realized that I got to about day 15 to 20 and I was so off base.
Yeah.
I had just written so many words that were unnecessary and
Yeah.
didn't go anywhere, and plot threads that were
Mhm.
never going to
That's the
resolve.
worst because then you have to cut all those. Like
Yes,
that's
yes. And
painful.
you're like, man, I saw an interview one time with what's the guy's name that he wrote the Notebook and
Oh, ye
I'm I'm drawing a blank now. Anyway, he
will
talked
comfort.
about that he um typically writes, and these are just made up numbers, but I don't remember the exact numbers,
Yeah.
but you'll get the point. He writes like 120,000 words, knowing that his final word count will be about 90,000.
Mhm.
So he's just writing 30,000 words that
Yeah,
he
for no
doesn't
reason.
need, and that just scares me to death. Like, why
Yeah,
would you write 30,000 words that
I
you're just
know.
going to throw away?
Yep.
Um, so how did you come to have you always thought this way about, the planning stage, your book, the pre-writing, as I like to call it? Or is
Yeah.
this something that you kind of came into as you began
Um,
being a publisher?
I'm a very organized. For I have a million planners,
Yeah,
and I've always been very organized. Notebooks for hunting werewolves as a 10-year-old should pretty much give you an example of
sure,
how far
sure.
back we go with
Of
this.
course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everything is strict.
Nicholas
Uh,
Sparks, by the way. I just
yeah.
I just remembered
Yes,
his name. I'm
there we go.
sorry.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, it'll come
Yeah.
soon. So I've always known that I needed some kind of direction. I don't necessarily always stick to everything that I outline. And I will say that my indie project, it's subscription based. It's on Ream, and so there's not as much plotting in there. I'm kind of writing as I go, and as I kind of reach the midpoint, then I plotted out the rest of the book. And I only did that so I can put a pre-order up, so I knew kind of how long it would take me and how many
Sure.
chapters more or less I'm working with. But that was the first time that I didn't plot something, and it was so hard. I don't know how people who don't plot know how they do it. I applaud them because I every day I sat down to write, and I'm like, okay, well, let's see what it goes. This goes and how it's
Yeah.
gonna relate to the story later. It just seems like editing must be so much harder when you don't plot.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, I plot, but I also edit as I write. So I think I was listening to an interview, I believe it was Patterson, who said that before he sits down to write every day, he edits whatever he wrote the day before. And I'm like, you know what? That sounds good. I'll try it, and it has been so helpful because it gets me back into the story, especially when you're working on more than one project. But I need to plot. I don't know, and dabble with the plotting too. Honestly, it's,
Yeah.
oh my
Yeah.
god,
Well, and Dabble
wow,
has the plot grid has really helped
yes.
me to conceptualize the story without feeling like I'm writing out
Yes,
a high
it's
school
honestly,
English
it is
outline.
so great just having the different added notes that you can have for different
Right.
storylines. That's not even the way that I was plotting before, where I kind of plotted by act, by beats, like I would do like
Yeah.
scene by scene almost. But I never thought to break up the different storylines, even when I used to plot like on a big wall at home and not
Yeah.
on paper or on the computer. It's yeah, that tool has been really great. It's my favorite part,
Absolutely.
I think.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. 100%. Did you was it difficult to kind of translate the way you were planning to kind of this
To
new plot
um,
grid style planning?
Not honestly, it wasn't that. I think if you're not a plotter, it might be a little bit more difficult. Like if you're not used to even having a layout,
Yeah.
it's a little bit more difficult. But again, the reason I liked it so much is that it wasn't so strict. that if you didn't plan out before, you could literally just have a couple of scenes and go from there. Like, you don't need to go
Right.
all out. But I think for me, because I was so excited to try something new, and to try it before Nano, that it wasn't that difficult to transition. Um, and now I have so many more things to work with, whether I didn't have them before. I find it's easier not to write yourself into a plot hole with this grid.
Yeah.
Whereas if I was plotting just straight scene by scene or in a notebook, there would still be holes. And as I'm writing, I would have to go back and change some stuff and edit.
Yeah. The way I look at outlining and the dabble plot grid definitely helps me with this is I like to think of it in terms of like a road trip. And
Hmm.
if you were in Southern California, like Los Angeles, and you were going to take a road trip to New York, somewhere in the northeast of America, there are a dozen different ways you could go to get there. You could drive along the south, you could go directly through the middle of the country, you could go
Yep.
up north and go. Um, you know, um, but I like to think of like tent poles
Hmm.
along the way. These are destinations that I absolutely want to hit, and then
Yeah.
what happens between them?
The world's biggest
Maybe,
ball of yarn, for
yeah,
example.
yeah, yeah. Maybe we want to see the world's biggest ball of yarn,
Yeah.
or the St. Louis Arch, or whatever, along the way. Well, that will, depending on what kind of waypoints I've laid out, may
Hmm.
determine how I get there, and
Yep.
that leaves enough kind of chaos and mystery there that keeps me excited every day. But I know where that destination is that I have to write
Right.
toward, and the plot grid helps me lay that out and make
Hmm.
sure that I'm shooting toward that
Yeah.
next,
And that's
checkpoint.
exactly when I work with book coaching and different authors. That's exactly what we try to think about. Is you want to hit just certain points, like, and just so you know where you're going. If you're not a
Yeah.
plotter, and that's in the fast way of plotting that I was talking about in the video, is like, just figure out where you start, where your midpoint is, where you're going to end up, and if you have a twist, what that twist is. Just, if you have those points, it's a lot easier to work towards them, and it will help you develop the story too. I find as soon as I start plotting, it gives me ideas of where the story could go, especially if you're writing mystery. I know a couple, I think two authors maybe, that write mystery without plotting, and I'm amazed by them.
Yeah, I don't know how that works.
I I think for them, they're like, if I'm surprised about who the killer is, the reader will be as well. I'm like, that's a really good way of thinking about it. My brain could never.
Yeah, and to me, you're required to write the book twice because
Yes.
you can kind of figure out where you're going,
Mhm.
but then you have to go back and you have to put in your red herrings
Yeah,
and
all those
put
little
in
breadcrumbs and
clues.
clues, and yeah.
Yeah, and that's just, just spend a little time
Hmm.
thinking about it.
Yeah.
Leave yourself plenty of room to write mysteriously, but
Hmm.
there's some things you need to plan
You
out. It
need to
just
know, yeah.
yeah.
I usually do plan that out, but it's surprising. It's been actually interesting in the last couple of books that I've been working with. When I get to the point that I plotted of the twist and the killer, something else comes to me, and it's always, and then I have to rework it a bit because it was a shocking twist that even I didn't expect, and so I think that's been helping too. It's both worlds in a way.
Wow. You mentioned book coaching,
Mhm.
because you're not busy enough as it is
No,
between
yeah, got to do a
writing and
million things.
publishing and doing layout and design. You're also coaching. How did you get into that?
Oh my gosh. I started doing it. I've had a few authors actually that were coming from, it was romance, which is strange because I didn't write any romance at all, but several romance authors that wanted to switch over to a different genre. And so, because I'm writing in the genres that they wanted to switch over to, we kind of started chatting, and I helped them with that and how to make the change, and guided them through their plotting and books, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. They had a friend of a friend, and I got into coaching those friends, and then took on some editing. And it was just, I don't know, I just love books. I guess trying to be in the midst of it all as much as I can.
Yeah. If you have someone that approaches you that has never written and published before, what would be a piece of beginner advice that you would give them?
Just forget everything that you might have seen. Don't look at your favorite books. Don't look at anything like that. Just put it out of your mind, and figure out what your story is and what it is you really want to say. And when you do, we usually sit on it because there's always more than one, and you have to untangle that story a little bit, especially when you haven't written a book before, because you might be coming into a story based on what you've read. And usually it's what
Right.
you've read recently because that's what your favorite is right now. That might not be the story that you yourself need to tell. It might not even be a story you're super passionate about. And so we try to kind of come up with as many ideas as possible. It's like an idea hat. And then we go through
Yeah.
it, and then we figure out like what resides the best with where that person is and what it is they actually want to say with their voice, because it might not be the story that they think they want to say, because the story that they might have in their minds, they could be just thinking about it because they think it's popular, it's trending, it's what people expect them to write, it's what their friends are writing, right? And so that's not
Yeah.
necessarily good for anybody.
Yeah.
So I think just forgetting about everything that you might know about publishing, about books, about writing, just until you figure out who it is that you are as an author or who you want to be, because that will change.
Gotcha. As an author yourself, when you begin a new book or a new first book in a series, you've
Mhm.
never written anything involving these characters, plots, or whatever settings before. What's the first thing that comes to you? Is it a character that you're intrigued by? Is it a plot point that you just can't wait to
Mhm.
drop some characters into and see how they react? Is it a setting? What is that usually that first thing that sparks the new world off for you?
So it's surprisingly been different for every single, not book, but for every single series. With Shadowhurst, the first thing I saw was Shadowhurst, driving into Shadowhurst, this little town that has a lot of secrets hidden beneath it. That's not as boring
Yeah.
as it seems, and it's quite the opposite. Um, Only after that did I see Billy and the witch that was cast out, and all the different entanglements that she could get into. With Orchard Hollow, I saw the ghost and I saw a raccoon. And that's not even, they're not even the main characters, they're the sidekicks. But that I saw the two of them interacting and having this little argument, and I just pictured it in my head, and it was the funniest thing I think I could think of at the time. And I thought I need to write these characters into a book. And because there's a ghost, I knew there had to be a body that gets discovered.
Right.
And from there, Orchard Hollow kind of grew. Etherborn, which was my first series, I think I saw the character first, but I saw the main character first. So it's been different for every single one. Something just kind of clicks.
I love that because so many people get hung up, especially people that are not yet writers. They get so hung up on where writers get their ideas from, and to me, ideas are. I mean, ideas are everywhere.
Oh my
They're just
God, how
swimming
many
around everywhere. It's
lists do authors usually have of different ideas for future books? Like a million.
exactly, yeah. That ideas are not the problem. It's
No, yeah.
what you do with that idea, and
And if that
is it
idea is worth pursuing at that time,
exactly?
it's
Is it
making
worth
that choice
pursuing?
too. Yeah.
Yeah,
Which is hard. Like I know
absolutely.
for the Gilded Queens, I didn't think of a character, I didn't think of a setting. The only thing that I remember going in my head very quickly, and this was just me chatting with my husband, was just the tagline, which is "Every century, four queens must die," and I thought of that, and I'm like, "There's a
You're
story
like
here. I know
there,
there's a story here, and I think it's
right?
going to be some kind of epic fantasy." And that's all I knew. and
Oh,
and from there, the Gilded Queens were born, and now we're pre-ordering book one. So
love it, love it. If people are just discovering you and want to dig into your writing, where would you tell them to begin?
so book wise, I think it's a hard one. It depends because they're so different, right? I have the cozies and the
Yeah,
YA. If they're going YA, then start with Witch of Shadows, which is the first of the Shadowhurst. It's 8 books plus a novella, so it'll take them a while to get through that.
yeah,
If you're more into like a lighthearted mystery that has a lot of comedy in it, then start with A Grave Roast, which is the first of Orchard Hollow. So it's there's I would say these two are the most recent that you
Yeah,
should get into. If you are looking to support a completely different project, then Gilded Queens is your friend. So,
love it. You have a lot going on. Your website is a great resource for all sorts of stuff.
mhm.
If what is your URL where people can?
Yeah, it's ansage.ca.
Okay,
But somebody has
ANC.
a .com. How dare they?
How dare they? How dare they?
Seriously. Yeah, I
Um,
think I looked into it and it was like almost six figures to buy it back. And I'm like, well, that's
well, yep, the .ca is perfect.
that is great. I am in Canada.
Right.
So.
Right, right. Well, we will link up all those in the show notes to make it easy for folks to find you.
Mhm.
Nessa, this has been so much fun chatting. Thank you so
You
much for taking
too.
time to come on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is so exciting. And thank
Absolutely.
you for Dabble because I love it.
If we'll link up the new book and where they can find your whole back catalog and all that
Amazing.
in the show notes to make it easy for folks to find you.
Perfect.
Thank you, Anessa.
Stay magical, everyone.